there, lovely ladies, lovely gentlemen. In today's video, I'm going to attempt to answer a question that I get often, which is, why was I chosen to basically fulfill that specific family role? Or why was I the scapegoat? Why was I the golden child? Or why was I the invisible child, right? Now, before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that if you want me to answer one of your questions, then you can send me your question at tarianarocha.com.br/asktari. So that's tarianarocha.com.br/asktari. And then I might choose your question and do a live video answer for it. All right. So there's a couple of things I want to make perfectly clear before I carry on with this video. And the very first thing is, I did not find any research or any official literature about what I'm going to talk about in this video. So where does the information come from? This is not some sort of official report. This is a video that was made as a response to the demand that I get for greater understanding. Why did I, what was I chosen to fill this specific role in my family? Well, these answers came from a Facebook group that I have that right now has 10,000 members. In Portuguese, it's called Entre no Seu Poder. And what I did was I actually released a poll there, and I read people's stories, and I was able to kind of figure out what the overwhelming patterns were in terms of which characteristics made certain people be chosen to be the scapegoat and which characteristics make people more likely to be the golden child, so on and so forth. So again, this is not an official report based on research or anything like that. I'm not really even sure there is any research at all based on what I'm going to talk about, but it is based on the personal story of thousands of people. All right. The second thing I want to make perfectly clear is the reason why I want to do this video. Listen, I think it's super valid for us to understand how narcissists think, particularly so we can get that what they think has nothing to do with us, right? So I want to make this video so that you can understand that regardless of the role that they chose for you, and they can be your mom or your dad, it's really got nothing to do with you. It's got to do with their own personal processes, as you will see when I actually list out the characteristics of the children that end up being chosen to fill these different roles in the family. So this is not a matter of being obsessed with why did my mom choose me as the scapegoat? I must find the answer, otherwise I cannot take a step towards healing. That's not it at all. I just think it's just interesting information for us to be able to understand family dynamics that involve narcissistic parents, right? So that's the reason why I'm doing it. The other thing I want to say to you guys is that there were a few other little pieces of information that were interesting that I was able to see with this poll. And the first one is, as I already suspected, the vast majority of the people who answered were the scapegoat. And very few people identified as the invisible child or the golden child. And this leads me to believe that, as I already suspected, the person who is the least likely to break free from such a toxic family environment are the golden child, and also we saw the invisible child, right? And the scapegoat by far is the one who picks up on the toxic family dynamics and is able to break free, particularly because the scapegoat never really has a sense that he or she even belongs to anything to begin with. So it makes sense that they would feel more at ease to kind of look for that sort of support in other places. So it's very rare for golden children to understand and break free from the dynamics, and also for the invisible child to understand and break free. The other thing that I was able to observe through this poll is that approximately half of the people who voted actually played out different roles in their family from their teens onward. So we know that narcissistic parents are very uncomfortable with their children's individuality and with the fact that their children are eventually going to grow up and, you know, have their own opinions and their own desires and their own lives. So we do observe that there is a general lack of interest that is demonstrated by narcissistic parents with regards to their children when their children reach adolescence. They become teenagers, they start becoming their own people, and at this point, many children become the scapegoats or the invisible child or just get discarded. So this was actually true for about half of the people who voted. So that's how frequent it is for people to be abandoned in some respect emotionally when they are dealing with narcissistic parents and when they become teenagers. The other thing that I was able to observe is that only children ended up being all of the roles. So they are the scapegoat, they're in the morning, and in the afternoon they become the invisible child, and at night they are the golden child. So if you were an only child, then you're probably quite used to having to be all of these different things for your mom or for your dad. And so basically what I'd like to say is that these things are not fixed, okay? What happened in your family might be slightly different from what I'm saying here. There seems to be great mobility in these roles. So it seems that many people who were one role eventually were another role as well. But when I start listing out what seems to be the reasons why you were one role or the other role, this kind of reveals information, not anything new, honestly, about how the narcissistic mind works. So without further ado, I'm actually going to get right on into why, if you were the scapegoat, the top 7 reasons that you might have been the scapegoat according to the stories that I got back from these polls, some of which were very actually repetitive, and these were revealing stories. Now, what I hear around the internet is that the scapegoat is the empath. It's that child who's super loving and therefore does not fit into the family dynamics. This is not actually what was confirmed at all through the poll, which I found interesting. It would seem that the greatest reason, the number one reason that a child gets chosen to be the scapegoat has nothing to do with her being empathetic. It's got to do with her having her own personality and not agreeing with everything that goes on. So time after time, the stories that I got about people who were scapegoats, they had their own opinion. They didn't just do everything that their parents told them to do. They had a strong personality. They weren't easily manipulated. So obviously they were going to be the scapegoat. So this is the number one reason why certain children get chosen to be the scapegoat. Again, according to this poll that I did informally in my group. The second reason that was just as voted as this number one reason, so this is interesting to hear, is that the vast majority of the scapegoats seem to be the oldest child. And what seems to happen is that there's a cat over here, guys. There's always a cat around, right? So she's licking herself. Are you gonna lick yourself? Can you do this over here? Thank you. So it would seem that what happens is narcissistic parents have their first child, and then they'll have the second child or the third child, at which point some of them lose interest in raising their other children. And then they transfer the responsibility of being the parent onto the firstborn. And then the firstborn, all of a sudden, it's demanded that this firstborn child act like a parent. And obviously this is impossible because we're dealing with a child. A child does not know how to raise other children. And so the narcissistic parents will actually blame this firstborn child for not being a good enough parent to its brothers and sisters, to its siblings. So this was just as voted as the other reason for being the scapegoat, which is having a strong personality. So I thought that was very interesting. Let me know if this is true for you, if in your family dynamics, the oldest child is also the scapegoat. The third most commonly told story as to why were you the scapegoat was, I was the only woman amongst lots of different children who were all men. So it would seem that narcissistic mothers in particular hate the experience of womanhood, even the feminist ones, because there's basically different types of that one daughter is going to get chosen by the mother to be the scapegoat, as an expression of how the mother projects her own hatred towards womanhood and towards the experience of being a woman onto this child who ends up being the scapegoat. So guys, it's said that the mother felt envy or jealousy towards this child, maybe because she had some sort of ability that made the mother feel jealous, and oftentimes because this child had a very special relationship with her father, causing the mother to feel excluded and jealous, and therefore this mother starts considering her child as some sort of competition or someone that's not so great to have around, and then the child becomes the scapegoat. The fifth most common reason that you might have been chosen to be the scapegoat is that you did not measure up somehow in terms of you not living up to some expectation that your mother or your father had. So I mostly got back answers from people who had narcissistic mothers. And what I mean by you were not able to satisfy her expectations is, I'm talking about situations like she got pregnant and she thought that having a child was going to fill her inner void, and it didn't. She felt just as empty and just more depressed and exhausted after having the child. So since the child did not make her happy, the child then becomes a scapegoat for not fulfilling the expectations that the mother has projected onto her. Another example, we have got stories about people who had a certain sort of relationship with their mother in the beginning, or their father, where they tried to make this child become the golden child. But like I said, the scapegoat seems to be that one kid that has a personality, and so they did not like being the golden child, and they wouldn't accept doing everything and being everything that the narcissistic mother or father would want them to do and be. And so they kind of frustrated their parents' expectations for them, and therefore were turned into the scapegoat, right? So this is what I mean by the scapegoat is that kid who has expectations that she cannot fulfill projected onto her, and therefore gets punished for not fulfilling those expectations. The sixth most common reason that you might be the scapegoat in your family is that your birth or the pregnancy, when your mom was pregnant with you, this generated some sort of negative impact in her life. And then she punished you for this negative impact. So for example, maybe she was pregnant and she was abandoned by your father when she was pregnant. And so she associates being your mom with being abandoned. So she's going to punish you for the rest of your life. Or maybe she was pregnant and she got pregnant and she was thrown out of her family house. And then she was, out on the streets. So she punishes the child for having her be thrown out of the house, even though she was pregnant. She's the one that got pregnant. The kid just kind of popped up, right? And the seventh most common reason why you became the scapegoat is that the other person who was the scapegoat either died or went away. So this seems to ring really true, particularly in light of the other information that I told you guys about, where half of the people who voted were like, yeah, I was this one role, but I also, I was other roles as well, because the family dynamics changes when a person dies, when someone goes away, and the narcissistic parent needs a scapegoat more so than they need a golden child. Okay? So I'm going to just wrap up the 7 most common reasons I got back from hundreds of stories for why you might have been chosen to be the scapegoat. Number 1, the most voted reason is you had a strong personality, you had your own opinions, you did not just do everything you were told to do. Number 2, you were the eldest child and it was expected that you be a parent to your younger siblings. Number 3, you were the only woman in a family full of men. Number 4, your mother felt jealousy towards some good quality that you had, or jealousy about the fact that you had a very intimate relationship with your father, and then she wanted to exclude you from this relationship. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5, you frustrated some sort of expectation that she had for you. Either you weren't able to make her happy, or you weren't able to act the way that she wanted you to act, right? So she had some sort of expectation. You didn't fulfill it, so you became the scapegoat. Number 6, your birth or the pregnancy reminds her of something negative, like being abandoned or being thrown out, and so she punishes you for the rest of your life. And the 7th most common reason is the original scapegoat went away or died. So I guess you have to be the scapegoat now. Okie dokie. So let's go on to the reasons why someone would be chosen to be the golden child and why someone would be chosen to be the invisible child. And again, because there's no research that I was able to find on this, and these are just, this is just feedback that I get from my followers and clients, there's little information about the golden child and even less information about the invisible child. But I was able to identify 2 important aspects of each of these different roles that might be useful, okay? The golden child basically has 3 very strong qualities that make her get chosen or him get chosen to be the golden child. Number 1, the golden child is the most easily manipulated. So I was actually the golden child in my family, not because I was a psychopath, not because I was a narcissist, but because I was a goody two-shoes. And I believed everything everybody told me, and I certainly believed everything my mom or my dad told me, my dad's. And I was very easy to manipulate. And this seems to be the number 1 reason amongst the golden children who escaped the dynamics, because the other ones who are still there, don't have a story to tell, or they are the narcissists and the psychopaths. But the number 1 reason for you having been chosen to be the golden child is probably because you were very, very easy to manipulate. Okay? The second most common reason for you being the golden child is that you became your parents' parent. So you were a good parent to your parents. So you were your mother's mom, or you were your dad's mother, or you were your mother's father, right? There was an actual a role reversal there, and they were able to act like helpless children who need lots of attention and who need people to cater to them all the time, and you took on that role. So you were a great mom or a great dad. The twinship, where in order to understand this, think about it this way. Now, if you ever mention that you have different interests, I either going to completely check out because I have no interest in anything that does not relate to something that has got to do with me, right? Or I'm going to humiliate you or minimize. Sorry, we had some connection problems. So even grandiose narcissists who are oftentimes open bullies, when life doesn't go the way that they want it to go, they will pull out the I'm the biggest victim card, right? So that we have the scapegoat that needs to be blamed for whatever the narcissistic personality cannot admit to. That's why we need a scapegoat in every family. We have the golden child, who basically is going to take on, it's going to do whatever the narcissistic parent wants it to do. And that's why it's the golden child, because it just says yes to everything. But then we have that one child that doesn't really fit in anywhere and kind of gets ignored. And that's the invisible child. And what we learn is that children are going to adopt different personas according to what gets their needs met within a family. So we all kind of come to planet Earth with some of our own characteristics already. Some of them, we gain them later on, but we already have certain tendencies. Like one of these tendencies is we have a tendency to be extroverted or introverted. And this really seems to be more genetic, more of a nature versus nurture sort of situation. So when it comes to the invisible child, the only thing that seems to be kind of maybe a pattern, because the invisible child really is that one child that within the family dynamics, the invisible child, notice that the golden child said yes to everything. The scapegoat, didn't really accept stuff, but the invisible child doesn't feel apt to really make any strong claims or any bold statements. Oftentimes, the invisible child does not see a way to exist in the family dynamics. So what she or he does is they start isolating themselves within their own minds. Oftentimes, the invisible child is that person that has no social skills, no friends, doesn't leave the house, oftentimes depressed, and just kind of forgotten by the family, And the only thing that I saw that might be considered a pattern for the child that is the invisible child seems to be this tendency, this introverted tendency to, when you see problems, kind of go off into your head. Okay? The invisible, someone said here, I think the invisible child has nothing useful to the narc. That's exactly it. The invisible child doesn't have any sort of useful role, basically function, purpose for the narcissist. And she feels this way. She knows that she's useless. And so there's really no place to go because there's no place for her in the family. So really what's left for her or for him other than just kind of withdrawing into their own minds, right? Now, what was interesting about this poll that I did is that another role popped up, and this family role was suggested by my followers. And if you look online, there's actually a number of other roles other than just the scapegoat, the golden child, and the invisible child. You have the clown, right? The golden child is actually many different types of roles, which is the mother, the cheerleader, which is the twinship sort of phenomenon that we're talking about. So there's many different roles. It's not just what we're talking about. And possibly your specific role was a mixture of different things. But, this other role that they mentioned is something that they called the incapable child. And this is certainly something that we see and that doesn't fit into exactly the other roles 100%. The incapable child might be considered kind of a scapegoat, might be considered kind of an invisible child. But this incapable child is that one kid that gets chosen to be treated basically like they are intellectually and emotionally stunted, handicapped, and incapable of ever getting better or growing up. It says this does not happen in all families, okay? But we see this happen with parents who are very overprotective. And the interesting thing is they're not overprotective of all the children. They will choose a child oftentimes, and they will actually prevent this child well into its adult phase from doing normal things like leaving the house by himself or by herself or frying an egg. And this incapable child sometimes is kind of, it's not really the one that does everything wrong in terms of like, oh, this is why the family is so wrong because there's this kid in the family. No, that's the scapegoat. The invisible child rather, I'm sorry, the incapable child rather gets this kind of rap where she's like, oh, you know that one, well, she's a little slow, she can't do things by herself, so we do it for her. Don't fry that egg now, you're gonna burn yourself. I know you're 26, but you're not ready for that. You know, it's that sort of behavior that she gets from her parents. And I'm actually going to read something that one of my followers told me about this concept of the incapable child. And of course, we're talking about mothers who engulf their children, right? Overprotective mothers who keep their children childlike so as never to be abandoned. I'm going to describe what this sounds like, and then you'll understand. So one follower told me, I thought my younger sister was the invisible child, but I think that she can be considered the incapable child. She just turned 20 and never leaves home. My mother controls her life in every single aspect. I have never seen her go out with friends. Literally, she's not allowed to leave the house. About 2 years ago, she started doing therapy, and now all she does is go to therapy and then from therapy back home. She takes like 5 different types of medication. One day, my mom and her went out to ride their bikes, and my sister actually rode her bike around the block. My mom almost killed her. She said that she could have gotten raped and that she shouldn't talk to strangers. She treats my 20-year-old sister as if she is a disabled 10-year-old child, and my sister accepts this. She needs to ask permission for everything. My mom even hides her laptop, and she can only use it when my mom authorizes her. My mom locks all of the food in a room and says that if she could, she would put a lock on the fridge as well. She cooks everything for my sister. If she needs an egg, she will fry an egg for my sister and tell her that she can't do it herself. So this is a quite terrifying account of what the incapable child that gets engulfed by an overprotective mother or father, generally the mother, but oftentimes the father, okay? This is what the incapable child goes through, and they become what their parents make of them. They are not incapable, they are not childish, they are not, you know, they don't have intellectual handicaps or emotion, they don't have any handicap, but they become emotionally and intellectually handicapped, full of guilt and kind of dead inside, because they cannot grow up. Their mothers will not allow them, and their fathers will not allow them to grow up. So this is terrifying. And unfortunately, I have seen this over and over and over in the stories that my clients and my followers tell me. So I thought it was worthwhile to mention the incapable child. All right, guys. So that's the information that I have for you, okay? Please let me know if you identified, if this made sense, if you would add anything, any other information that I haven't mentioned. If you are on YouTube, let me know what your experience is in the comments. Also, subscribe to the channel. I will be releasing regular videos in English as well as in Portuguese, but regularly in English. If you want me to answer your question, then send me your question to tarianarocha.com.br/asktari. tarianarocha.com.br/asktari. And I'll be happy to maybe choose one of your questions and make a live video answer for you. So if you're on YouTube and you're watching this video, please subscribe, hit that bell, and share this video with someone if you think it might help someone else. I'm going to wrap this up for YouTube, and then I'm going to go back into the comments here on Instagram. And you can find me on Instagram at Tariana Rocha, all together, okay? This is my English profile. I have an artistic profile. I have a Portuguese profile. So the right one is Tariana Rocha, all together. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Send me your questions, and that's it for now. Now for the rest of you.